All right, this video is a sample chart reading about relationships. I'm not going to do a full analysis like I would do with a client, but I want to hit on some of the highlights. And it's a personal chart, a personal story, and the chart is very descriptive, so I thought it would be a good one to share. So the situation, I'm recording this September 9th, 2021. Last December, I broke up with somebody because he was super absorbed in his career and wasn't prioritizing me, and was kind of putting me on the back burner and being really selfish about it. And I got sick of it and kind of gave it a fiery ending, gave him a piece of my mind, and said, we're done unless you apologize, because, I have this soft, forgiving Pisces moon, and I give people too many chances. It's probably not a great thing, but I did leave that door open of, hey, if you apologize. But anyway, so I haven't heard from him since, and probably, haven't expected to. Of course, breaking up is hard. You care about somebody, the pain continues, and, you think about them, and, there are better and worse days in that regard, right? So anyway, that's the backstory. A few days ago, a coworker gave me tickets to a live performance of Hamilton at the theater, which is like a dream of mine. I love musical theater. And I was kind of in a weak moment and just kind of felt like, oh, I really want to go with my ex. I don't want to go by myself. And I wrestled with, should I do a horary about this? Because, just the fact of engaging with the horary kind of indicates that I'm not like moving on, right? So should I even do it? But I was in this really kind of moment of weakness, and I went ahead and cast a chart. Right, so the actual question I asked is, will my ex come back into my life so that I can invite him to the theater? Now, when you're reading for yourself, I don't usually recommend reading for yourself because it's really hard to be objective. You really want to triple check that the chart is radical first. Now, what does that mean? Radical means that it's actually a divination chart, that the heavens are willing to answer, that it matches the situation, etc. Right? So, one way to check for radicality is to look for resonance with the natal chart. In my case, there's not a lot of resonance. There is the Moon-Mars conjunction, which is opposite my natal moon. But that's just a transit. It's not necessarily specific to this chart, right? There are a few like house cusp things that aspect, like minor things in my chart, but it's honestly not a really strong resonance with my chart. But there's a ton of resonance with the chart of my ex. The midheaven is on my ex's ascendant. The ascendant is on my ex's moon. So, and there's several other placements that are like, whoa, this is kind of underlining something here. So I feel like, okay, yeah, I do have a radical chart. So again, I'm not doing a super deep dive. I'm just kind of highlighting some points in this video. When you're doing relationship charts, usually you're looking at the first house and the seventh house. So the first house is Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. So Jupiter is representing me in this chart. The seventh house is Gemini, ruled by Mercury. That represents my ex in this chart. Now, usually in questions like these, the answer is no. And I was fully expecting a no, because I know that this is an unhealthy question to even be asking in the first place. But I kind of was surprised to see what I saw. So let's look at this. There are two parts to this question. Will he return? And can I invite him to the theater? Right. So taking the second part of it, Venus, planet, represents the theater because it's the ruler of the fifth house of pleasure and entertainment. And also Venus is a natural ruler of the arts, right? So it makes perfect sense that Venus would be representing the theater. So we're going to look for aspects to Venus and see if we have a chance there. And there is no perfection aspect with Venus. So I can feel fairly confident that my ex won't be attending the theater. So that part of the question can be put to rest. Now, what about the question of is he going to return to my life? This surprised me because there is this applying trine between Mercury and Jupiter, and there's nothing in their way. They're mutually applying to each other. Now, it's out of orb, meaning it's the degrees are far apart. The trine is not actually in energy right now, so the energy is weak. But there could be an encounter in the future. And that's why I wanted to record this video now, to have a record that I called it in advance if it does happen. Now, whether it happens depends on how much energy there is behind the transit here, or the aspect. I already mentioned the planets are mutually applying. That indicates there's an attraction. But is that enough? Jupiter is kind of weak in this chart. It is not in its home sign. It's not angular. It's retrograde. Now it is aspecting the ascendant, and it is fast in motion. There are some things going for it, but in general, overall, looking at everything, it's kind of a weak Jupiter right now. And that fits perfectly with my life. I said at a moment of weakness, right? There's a lot going on in my life that I have to focus on and take care of, and it's just kind of like, oh my gosh, I just don't even have the energy to deal with relationship drama right now. Now, what about Mercury? So Mercury is strong by position, right up there on the midheaven, but not by dignity. In Lily's system of dignity, or the Ptolemaic system of dignity, Mercury's peregrine, which means it doesn't have essential dignity. And this is interesting because if we use the Dorothean system of dignity, Mercury would have triplicity and face, which is fairly good dignity there. So we kind of wonder, like, which one should we use? I have been using the Ptolemaic system because that's what Lily uses, and that's what I learned on. And so normally I would just say, have faith in what you've been using and go forward with it. The only thing is that lately I have been taking courses with an astrologer who uses the Dorothean system, so I'm kind of in this moment of flux right now where I'm trying to decide, well, should I actually switch to Dorothean? Should I reconsider? Not really sure. That this makes this chart an interesting test case, because if there is a reunion with the ex of some kind, then I might have to reconsider using the dignities of Lily and maybe switch to Dorothean. So I'm keeping an open mind on that. Now let's look at this Mercury. This represents my ex. And if there is a reunion, I need to know, has he changed? Has he repented of his selfishness, right? Has he decided that he actually does have room in his life for a relationship? And that he wants to prioritize someone that he claims to care about. Well, look at this. Mercury's on the midheaven. That represents career. Exactly conjunct the midheaven. This is still somebody who is very highly focused on career, not on relationship. And I mentioned that midheaven is conjunct his natal ascendant. Remember I said I broke up because of the career thing and his selfishness. What do we see? We still see career and we still see self. I don't see an indication in this chart that he has changed or is interested in changing. So, if there is a reunion, what's the timing? A few ways to look at timing. We can use symbolic timing, or we can use literal timing. In the symbolic timing, you would look at the number of degrees between the two significators, and then take that to units of time. So we could use the number of degrees between Mercury and Jupiter, the two significators. As an example, they're about 13 degrees apart. I asked the question on September 7th, so we look 13 days later. That would be September 20th. Another way to do symbolic timing is using the moon. So the moon is about 14 degrees away from Mercury. So its next aspect to Mercury is about 14 degrees away, which would put us at September 21st. It's kind of interesting that there's like a double message going on there. But honestly, symbolic timing is a little, in my opinion and experience, it's kind of not always very reliable. Literal timing is often more reliable, and that would be, when does Mercury literally perfect in the sky its aspect to Jupiter. And strangely enough, that happens on September 20th or 21st. So we have like 3 testimonies of this day. Mercury perfects its aspect to Jupiter. It'll be at 23 Libra, and Jupiter will be at 23 Aquarius. And another kind of like underlining to this timing is, on that day there's a full moon conjunct my natal moon. So this is really quite a remarkable chart. All right, what's the usefulness of this, right? I already mentioned that this chart shows that this person hasn't changed, right? I don't see any openness in the chart of, Mercury making way for Jupiter or receiving Jupiter, or there's a mutual reception or something like that. There is that aspect, but there's no reception, there's no exchanging of energies. So the way that this chart is useful is it warns me about this. There could be an incident where the ex reaches out and says he wants to try again. But I need to know in advance that it's going to be the same as it was before. And so I can strengthen myself. I can be ready to, again, establish my boundaries. This is my standard for a relationship. Take it or leave it. So bottom line, the answer to this horary is, first of all, there won't be an attendance at the theater. There is a mutual attraction between the two parties. There is a desire to connect. Whether the connection happens or not is up in the air. I mentioned it might depend on whether I use Lily's triplicities or Dorothean. So that's really interesting. If it happens, I'm going to have to consider my dignity system. If it does happen, it will be somewhere around September 20th, give or take a few days. And if it does happen, I need to know in advance that this person hasn't changed, that he is still focused highly on his career and on himself and doesn't really have much room in his life for me. So there's the judgment. So I hope this was helpful, and I will follow up later and let you all know what happened.